Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 699, and today is October 28th, 2024. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. Got some big news to break down on today's show, so be sure to share the show. It's hosted at the Libertarian Institute. We repost the show on the blog at antiwar.com, YouTube, Rumble, or Odysee for the video version of the show. It's up anywhere you could listen to audio podcasts. And of course, follow me on Twitter at @KyleAnzalone_ for all my work, including all the articles I write, and starting off with this one that I wrote for antiwar.com. Friday night, October 25th, Israel bombs Tehran, U.S. expects Iranian response. So, Israel launched airstrikes on the Iranian capital Friday night. While the extent of the damage is unclear, and we'll get to that in the next article, the U.S. is expecting Iran to retaliate. Iranian media reported that some sites in the capital city of Tehran were targeted. A statement from the Israeli Defense Forces confirmed the strike. The statement said, in the response to the months of continued attacks, the Israeli Defense Forces conducted precise strikes on military targets in Iran. According to Axios, the U.S. expects Iran will retaliate. Quote, U.S. and Israeli officials believe Iran will respond militarily, adding, but hope it will be limited and allow the two adversaries to break the tit-for-tat cycle. And so this is interesting because, as we'll get into after we read the next article, there may be some space for de-escalation here. So, however, the White House is concerned that Iran's response to Israel will lead to a regional war. An official speaking with the Wall Street Journal confirmed that Tel Aviv did inform Washington it was preparing to strike Tehran, but did not specify how far in advance Israel warned the U.S. of its plans. The U.S. claimed Israel's attack on Iran was an act of self-defense. Quote, this is from the National Security Council spokesperson, Sean Savet. We understand that Israel is conducting targeted strikes against military targets in Iran as an act of self-exercise and self-defense in response to Iran's ballistic missile attack against Israel on October 1st. We would refer you to the Israeli government for more information about the operation. Last week, leaked top-secret U.S. intelligence documents provided some detail about Israeli preparations to strike Iran. Over the past year, the Middle East has moved closer to an all-out regional war as Israel has attacked several neighboring countries, conducted assassinations throughout the region, and slaughtered Palestinians. On October 1st, Iran attacked military sites in Israel with nearly 200 missiles in response to Tel Aviv killing Hamas's political leader in Tehran and assassinating Hezbollah's leader in Beirut. Tel Aviv has been vowing retaliation for the Iranian attack throughout the month. Tehran has said it will respond to any Israeli attack. Just before Israel attacked Iran on Friday, the U.S. moved fighter jets from Europe to the Middle East. In the lead up to the Israeli strike on Tehran, Tel Aviv requested the deployment of an American THAAD air defense system. The White House granted the request, and now 100 American soldiers are manning the systems in Israel, making them a potential target to any Iranian response. And so now let's talk about what actually happened in Tehran. This one from Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com, October 27th. Iran says Israel's attack killed 4 Iranian soldiers and damaged radar systems. So the Israeli airstrikes on Iran were launched Saturday morning and killed 4 Iranian soldiers, members of the Iranian Air Defense Force. The Iranian army said in a statement that the soldiers lost their lives while confronting the projectiles of the criminal Zionist regime in order to safeguard the security of Iran and prevent harm to the Iranian nation and interest. The Iranian military said that the Israeli attack hit bases in 3 Iranian provinces, mainly Tehran. The New York Times and other Western media outlets reported that Israeli strikes destroyed several air defense systems, but the Iranian military only confirmed that some radar systems were damaged and said it successfully countered the attack. So the Iranian military said, according to Al Jazeera, thanks to the timely performance of the country's air defenses, the attack caused limited damage and few radar systems were damaged. It is unclear at this point if Iran will retaliate and launch another major attack on Israel. The Iranian president said Sunday that Iran does not seek war, but warned there would be some sort of response. He said, "We do not seek war, but we will defend the rights of our nation and our country. We will give an appropriate response to the aggression of the Zionist regime." So the Iranian supreme leader said Iranian officials will determine how to respond. He said how to convey this power and resolve of the Iranian nation to the Zionist regime is for our officials to determine, and what is in the best interest of the nation and the country should be done. The U.S. has backed Israel's attack on Iran, saying it had a right to self-defense. Pentagon officials told NBC News that there was no direct U.S. involvement in the strikes, but the U.S. did support Israel by deploying the THAAD air defense system and vowing to defend Israel from any retaliation. I guess it's unclear what kind of potential logistic support or intelligence support the U.S. provided. And so want to give a little bit of analysis on this attack that Israel conducted against Iran. And it doesn't seem that a whole lot of damage was done, and it doesn't seem like it was a very large attack. Now, the attack was reported by Israeli media to come in 3 waves. I'm not sure if it actually did. And so I think there's a possibility here that this attack from Israel was really meant to de-escalate the situation. Certainly, if Israel accomplished what they set out to accomplish with their mission, then I do think this was an attempt to de-escalate, because honestly, it seemed like the Iranian strike was probably more significant than the Israeli strike, which would mean that Israel was not willing to necessarily take one on the chin, since 4 more Iranians died when in Israel no soldiers died. You did have 1 civilian killed, a Palestinian man, so effectively no Israelis were killed, and you had the 4 Iranian soldiers killed. And so in that way, maybe Israel did, but it did seem that more Iranian missiles were able to get through to their targets on the attack on Israel. So it's curious, right, that the Israelis would not conduct a much larger attack that they have been discussing for some time. Now, there's some possibilities here. The 2 that I think are most likely is, 1, in the first phase of what Israel had hoped to accomplish in their attack, they didn't do enough destruction to the Iranian air defense systems, and whatever they wanted to do in the second and the third phase of their attack, they were either had to scale it back, it was more limited, or they had to maybe call off attacks on certain targets entirely, simply because they weren't able to take out enough Iranian air defense systems. I think that's a possibility. I think the other possibility is that Israel really is reliant on the U.S. for these kind of operations and to conduct them in any kind of large scale manner. And so, there has been some talk for some time that Israel really needs the U.S. refueling planes and other kind of military equipment, or they're required, they need to use the Americans to do it. And so it's possible that the White House really didn't want to see, a week before this upcoming election, a major war break out in the Middle East and really constrained what Israel was allowed to do here. Now, I'm a little bit skeptical of that second point, only because if the White House was trying to rein in Israel, I do think Tel Aviv would make that public. Now, maybe that'll come out in the coming days, but I'm really trying to figure this out, because it was, in my view, uncharacteristically small strike by Israel. So maybe it was, they just couldn't penetrate the Iranian defenses and had to scale back what they wanted to do. Now, the other huge question is, will the Iranians respond? And I think if the past is any indication, they will not. I think this is an opportunity for Iran to tout a victory, to say that, they landed a significant strike on Israel that caused a lot of anxiety in Tel Aviv. And then when Tel Aviv responded, the Iranian response. And if you look at, Iranian accounts on social media, the Iranian government, they're kind of trying to mock this and downplay it. And so when Iran has taken that position in the past, it has been because they are looking to work down the de-escalation ladder. And so it could be that we could see a couple of significant steps of de-escalation in the Middle East, if it is really right that the Iranians are not going to respond to this. Now, counterpoint to that is the Iranians have said in the past month that old game is off. Look, in the past, we are willing to take one on the chin to de-escalate. You assassinate Soleimani, we bomb a little corner of your military base in Iraq. Those two things really aren't the same, but we're willing to like kind of lose the tit for tat exchange. And they say, no more. You attack us, we attack you. That's the way it's going to work from now on. So if that's the case, and the Iranian outlook and policy has really shifted, then I suppose we are going to see an Iranian response. I tend to not think that that's going to be the case, and that the Iranians are really going to try to use this as a path to de-escalate. But of course, as the Israelis have said, a lot of times all their actions aren't necessarily these overt military acts. There's a lot of covert things going on in the background. And so it may be that we see it, some kind of assassination or some other kind of attack on an Iranian nuclear facility, an oil infrastructure, more acts of sabotage and terrorism funded, and, intelligence from Israel conducting this, I think is a real possibility here. So just because one part of the Israeli strike on Iran is over doesn't mean it's all done. And so we could see something else spark more escalation here. So this is an interesting statement. This one from Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com. Report U.S. prepared to rescue Israeli pilots attacking Iran if needed. So the U.S. placed a fleet of fighter jets in the Middle East on standby to rescue Israeli pilots if their attack on Iran failed, Israeli Army radio reported on Sunday. The report said Israel and the U.S. coordinated a plan to ensure the safe extraction of pilots should the operation not succeed. The report said the U.S. didn't participate directly in the attack, but was prepared to intervene to rescue the mission. The Americans' advanced capabilities in the region will allow them to carry out rescue operations. The U.S. also supported the attack, which was carried out early Saturday morning, by pledging to defend Israel from any Iranian retaliation deployed against the THAAD missile system for that purpose. Israeli officials said around 100 Israeli fighter jets, spy planes, and refueling tankers were involved in the operation. The main fighter jet was the U.S.-made F-35. The Iranian foreign minister said that the U.S. was responsible for the attack since it supplied Israel with the air corridor for its jets to launch the airstrike, which killed 4 Iranian soldiers. So the foreign minister said the Americans gave the Zionist Air Force an air corridor, and the defense facilities they sent them before can be considered collaboration with the recent operation. We consider the Americans' collaboration with the Zionist entity to create tension in the region is something very clear. So Iranian officials said Israeli jets launched a strike from U.S.-controlled Iraqi airspace, complete Hezbollah and Iraqi Shia militia that's allied with Iran, said the U.S. must pay for letting Israeli fighter jets use its airspace. So the group said, according to a statement from Rudaw, which is a media outlet in Iraqi Kurdistan, Americans must pay the price for their recklessness in using Iraqi airspace, and this will happen with God's help at the right place and time. They will certainly dare to attack Iraq if they do not pay a heavy price for their aggression. The U.S. support for the Israeli attack on Iran could lead to attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria. If Iran chooses to retaliate by launching another missile attack on Israel, the 100 U.S. troops deployed to Israel with the THAAD system could be potential targets. So I don't want to downplay this too much. I don't want to say we're completely out of this escalation cycle between Israel and Iran. I don't think that will happen until there is a true resolution to the situation in Gaza, and that can't just be Israel stops bombing the strip every day and while the people languish and die in little fenced in prisons that they are setting up in Gaza, which could be a real horror show. um, and I'm by that I mean, some kind of real ceasefire where the Palestinians are able to return to somewhat normal kind of life in the Gaza Strip. If that's not allowed to happen, I think the tensions between Iran and Israel will continue to simmer near a boil, and that could boil over at any time. So this is going to continue to be a real concern. But the idea that we're going to have direct war between Israel and Iran before the U.S. election seems to have been averted at this point. All right, next up here, Israelis kill 5 journalists on Sunday in Gaza. This one, Jason Ditz, antiwar.com. Israel has come under growing international criticism for its deliberate attacks on journalists. That doesn't seem to be impacting Israel policy, however, as 5 more journalists were reported killed today in attacks across the Gaza Strip. The victims of today's attack include Saeed Radwan with the Alaska TV, Hazma Abu Salid with Sada News Agency, and 3 other journalists. So they were killed in an Israeli attack on a UN school in the Al-Shati refugee camp where people were sheltering from the ongoing attacks. 9 civilians overall were killed, including the 3 journalists who were killed in that attack, and then 2 journalists were killed in separate attacks. This brings the number of journalists killed in Israel's war on the Gaza Strip to at least 180. This toll, on top of those killed in other Israeli wars, including the 3 Lebanese journalists who were killed in a deliberate Israeli attack on Friday. So really mounting toll Israel is taking on journalists at this point, which is, part of the reason why there's such a significant media blackout over Gaza. And that's, made the role of doctors in Gaza, and particularly international and Western doctors in Gaza, even more important, because not only are they then the doctors, but they're also the only reporters of what's happening. And so Israel has now, really laid siege to the hospitals. And I think a part of this isn't just to shut down the hospitals and make the place even more unlivable. There's no hospital around that's not some place you want to be, especially if there's a war going on. But on top of that, if there is a the doctors are the people kind of letting the outside world know what's going on, and they're considered people with authority and good reputation and things like that. And so they're kind of causing a problem for Israel, at least on the Palestinian narrative getting out. And now it looks like they're trying to crush the hospitals in northern Gaza. So Israeli forces leave trail of destruction at Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza. So on Saturday, Israeli forces withdrew from a hospital in northern Gaza, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Israeli forces pulled out of the area after a siege of the hospital that lasted over 20 days. Israeli tanks fired on the hospital before troops stormed the facility and detained dozens of staff members and some patients. So a nurse at the hospital said, "We were surrounded from all sides. There was shooting from all directions with bombs and mortars." Medid says at least 2 children died in the intensive care unit on Friday after Israeli fire hit generators and oxygen tanks at the hospital. The Israeli attack also killed the son of Dr. Abu Safa, the hospital's director. So he said, "Everything we built, they have burned. They have burned our hearts. They killed my son." So, according to Reuters, Israeli forces arrested at least 44 of the 70 staff members of that hospital and later released only 14, including Abu Saif. So the men who were detained were humiliated because they were forced to take off their clothes. So Odysee said there are now only 2 doctors at the hospital for 145 patients, and that no surgery services are available. I don't have medical staff capable of providing them with surgical services. He is calling for a humanitarian corridor to allow more healthcare workers into the region and for patients who need surgery to be evacuated. We have called on the world, pleading to an open humanitarian corridor to bring in medical teams that can save those who can be saved. Israel has been attempting to carry out an ethnic cleansing campaign in northern Gaza since the beginning of the month that is focused on the Jabalia refugee camp and the areas around it, which has involved a complete siege of the north. The head of Gaza Civil Defense told NBC News on Sunday that there have been approximately 1,000 people killed and another 670 missing since the operations in northern Gaza began. Israeli strikes on Saturday killed at least 35 people. Middle East Eye reported that northern Gaza's healthcare system is now completely out of service following the attack on the hospital. Israel usually justifies its attack on hospitals in Gaza by claiming that Hamas members are present, but never offers evidence for its claims. 99 American healthcare workers who volunteered in Gaza recently said in an open letter to President Biden that none of them ever saw militant activity in the hospitals that they were in. The healthcare workers said in their letter, the 99 signatories to this letter spent a combined 254 weeks inside Gaza's largest hospitals and clinics. We wish to be absolutely clear, not once did any one of us see any type of Palestinian militant activity in any of Gaza's hospitals or other healthcare facilities. All right, so next up here, this one about Lebanon and the healthcare facilities there. Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com. Israeli strikes have killed 164 healthcare workers in Lebanon. So on Saturday, Israeli strikes targeted the southern Lebanese municipality and killed the defense medic and wounded 5 people. Lebanon's health ministry said the killing of the medic brought the total number of health workers killed by Israel in strikes on Lebanon to 164, and another 275 have been wounded. And this is a really insane ratio, right? Because 2,672 people have been killed in southern Lebanon, and 164 of them have been medical personnel. I mean, that seems like a really abnormally high ratio, and it would really suggest that Israel is targeting medical facilities, ambulances, and those first responders in southern Lebanon, which of course is just gross and disgusting war crimes. And yet, of course, it is backed with the full throat of the United States government. All right, everyone, that's where I'll wrap up the show for today. We'll have plenty more coming up later this week, so please stay tuned in. If you're a new listener, subscribe to this show somewhere. And again, we'll be back with another episode tomorrow morning.